Due to circumstances beyond our control, the opening segment of the Orleans CAN meeting on May 2nd, 2013 was not videotaped. These are the slides that were presented at the very opening of the meeting. The first 6 slides I'm going to voice over, and then we'll pick up the meeting in progress. This is the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan and Phase 1A. Ask the Experts series, Ask the Professional Engineers Forum. It was held Thursday, May 2nd, 2013. Doug Fromm is the president of Orleans CAN, and he serves as the moderator for the meeting. The panel consists of Mike Giggey, professional engineer from Wright Pierce, John Meyer, professional engineer, Orleans resident, Ed Leonard, professional engineer, Wright Pierce, and Brian Dudley, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. The overview, we're going to describe the CWMP process. We're going to lay out the CWMP's recommended plan. We'll recap the regulatory review process, describe the fuller plan, Phase 1A, discuss implementation issues, and answer questions. Wastewater project development. There are 3 principal steps: planning, preparation of the CWMP, design, the preliminary design, the final design, plans and specifications, and construction. CWMP, Comprehensive Wastewater Management Planning. Determine if current wastewater management practices need improvement. Identify and evaluate alternatives. Formulate a recommended plan. Address environmental impacts. Provide for public consultation. The Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. The process started in 2005. The WMSC Wastewater Management Steering Committee, made up of members of the Health, Planning, Finance, Board of Selectmen, Water, and Conservation Commission. Wright Pierce was retained as the consultant. The recommended plan was endorsed by town meeting in October of 2008. Regulatory reviews in 2009 and 2010, and the process concluded in December 2010. And now we will pick up with Mike Quigley in his presentation in progress.
And endorsed solidly by town meeting. The pretty significant regulatory review occurred thereafter in 2009 and 2010, and the final report, 2-volume Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan dated December 2010. I want to talk a bit about the problem, the setting. And you've all heard the term Title V. If you have a Title V system at your home, you have a septic tank and leaching field designed in accordance with Title V, the state sanitary code. And I want everybody to recognize up front that Title V provides a cost-effective means of providing for the sanitary disposal of wastewater. It works if you only focus on the sanitary aspects. What do I mean by that? A Title V system is intended to remove enough solids from the wastewater you generate in your homes so that what's left over, the septic tank effluent, can readily percolate into the ground. The intention is to provide that modest level of treatment, but to allow the wastewater to stay underground. So from a sanitary perspective, Title V works well. And Brian is smiling because that's his baby. However, septic tank and leaching field systems do not remove enough nitrogen or phosphorus to protect the ponds and embayments, particularly in a sandy setting of Cape Cod. Now, if there weren't nitrogen control issues in town, if your ponds and embayments weren't imperiled, we would probably say, gee, Orleans, good Board of Health, you're doing pretty well, Title V works here. But we can't say that because of the nitrogen and secondarily the phosphorus issue. The bacterial issues are taken care of. It works in a sanitary sense, but not in the nitrogen control sense. So given that the sanitary aspects are well covered by a Title V system, the premise of the CWMP was to make use of them wherever possible. So I always get raised eyebrows when I say this, but septic tanks are the problem, therefore you should use them wherever possible. I mean that. Septic tank and leaching field systems are cost effective, and the best plan town-wide is to use those wherever you can and minimize the number of properties where you need to do something more sophisticated, because something that is more sophisticated is more expensive. So the task we were given, and the Wastewater Management Steering Committee was given, was to find a way to balance those two. Use the inexpensive sanitary approach wherever possible, but to minimize the number of parcels where something more sophisticated is needed. So the recommended plan, I think, is a success because we found a way to focus on the hotspots, to be able to allow as much as half of the properties in town to stay on the cost-effective Title V systems. The next step was to find ways to use what we've called non-structural methods. Before you start putting pipes in the street and building concrete structures, find a way through non-structural means to remove nitrogen. And the recommended plan includes fertilizer controls, it includes stormwater management, and it emphasizes the use of natural attenuation. So once you've picked the low-hanging fruit, the low-cost means of nitrogen control, what do you do next? Well, our next step was to look at decentralized systems. And the recommended plan includes 5 such systems. 4 of them to address nitrogen control in the headwaters embayments of the Nauset system and Pleasant Bay, and a 5th one at Baker's Pond focused on phosphorus. So we have as many septic systems as we can, as the environment will allow, non-structural approaches to have low-cost nitrogen removal, and the 3rd step, decentralized systems. Then the intention is to build a sewer system in phases, and the phasing is important so that the extent of each phase can be informed by the success of the phases before it. CWMP includes controls on both nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrogen is an issue in coastal waters, phosphorus in freshwater ponds. And another key part of the recommended plan is to take the Tri-Town septic facility site, where wastewater management has been in place for a couple of decades, build a wastewater treatment facility that's state-of-the-art to remove as much nitrogen and phosphorus as possible. In addition to the wastewater part of it, the intention is to provide a place to treat septage. With half of the homes and businesses in Orleans still on septic systems, there's a need to take care of septage, the solid waste pump from the septic system. So the recommended plan includes that component. It includes the disposal of the highly treated effluent into rapid infiltration basins so that the groundwater is recharged by that high quality effluent. This proposal does not include a direct discharge anywhere. It's a land-based system. An important part of the plan is to closely monitor the results of the money that's spent. At each phase, see what happened and judge, fine-tune later phases based on those results. So, it's clear, I hope it's clear to you that this plan is not a one-size-fits-all sewer the whole town plan. It's a hybrid plan. It's got on-site systems for half town, it's got cluster systems, a solid non-structural program, a phased sewer system, spend money wisely, and a small central treatment plant. It's not a big pipe plan, it's not a small pipe plan, it's a hybrid plan. We think drawing from the best options that are viable for the town of Orleans. We also want to recognize that the recommended plan is fully consistent with the planning process recommended by the Cape Cod Commission. In fact, we're pretty proud that the Regional Wastewater Management Plan that will be coming out over the next year or two has been influenced significantly by the planning work in Orleans. Tribute to the Wastewater Management Steering Committee. Some of the principles that the Commission has adopted for all towns to implement come directly from Orleans. And I was pleased to see the letter that came out last Friday from Paul Manswicki, the Executive Director of the Commission. And I've given you a quote here that's important. The Commission encourages the town to move forward with wastewater infrastructure planning, design, and construction consistent with the Orleans CWMP DRI approval. I'll tell you more about that approval in a minute. But it's significant. The Commission has been cautious in its support for some wastewater projects on the Cape because of the regional plan that it has underway, but it's wholly supportive of the Orleans plan. You may have heard something to the contrary. It's not true. Read this letter. It's an important, timely recommendation from the Commission. I also want to emphasize that the Orleans CWMP is adaptive. You've probably heard the term adaptive management. What does it mean? It means that you may have a problem serious enough to start action to solve it before you know all the details of it. And that means you do things in phases. You see what happens at the first phase before you embark on the second phase. Clearly, the Orleans plan is adaptive. There's actually a formal reporting process annually that's been recommended by our firm and actually made part of some of the regulatory approvals. And the plan that we put forth has 6 phases. But the hope is that you'll never get to the 6th phase, that the successes of the non-structural programs, the cluster systems, the decentralized items will mean that the 6th phase will never be necessary. We think it's prudent to tell Dave Withrow and the Board of Selectmen, hey, it might happen, make sure you've got a plan that handles the finances, but we think that the town of Orleans is in a position to work to avoid not just the 6th phase, but maybe even the 5th phase. Plan for it, but be prepared to avoid those later phases. Now, the town has benefited from some independent reviews, and we encourage that as a firm. 2 heads are always better than 1, 3 better than 2. And one of the speakers today was to address a peer review that was done in September of 2010. I have a full copy here, and I think some of the excerpts are available to you. The key recommendation that I thought was appropriate to put on the slide was the conclusion that the main elements of the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan are sound, they're based on good engineering and scientific bases, and that the plan should be implemented expeditiously. In addition to that work, the town hired the firm of Weston & Sampson to look at alternative collection systems. And this is a good example where the CWMP was somewhat general in the recommendations for collection. The town hired a second firm to fine-tune those recommendations in the preliminary design of the collection system. And we're pleased to see that the Weston & Sampson report corroborated our findings that the least expensive solution would be a small central plant and put it in place in a phased manner. So, I always hear the term big pipe and little pipe. I don't like those terms, they're too simple, but clearly the recommended plan that my firm produced and the Wastewater Management Steering Committee put into place, it's not a big pipe program. In our business doing work all across the country and around the world, always see communities or regions that decide to do a decentralized approach. Routinely, that means building several wastewater treatment plants of 4, 5, 6 million gallons a day, much larger than is proposed here. So a centralized plan and a decentralized plan really depend on the setting. Your plan has some decentralized components. We think it's a tailored mix of centralized and decentralized, and the intention is to balance the first cost, the cost to build it, the operation and maintenance cost, the annual bill, and its adaptability, most important. I also want to comment on the plan. I want you to view it as a town plan and not a Wright Pierce plan, but I sometimes felt like the orchestra leader with a very solid brass section and wind section and percussion. It was really a question of minds coming together and coming up with a good plan, but the experience of Wright Pierce, as Doug indicated from the beginning, goes back several decades. And I think we were hired because we have strengths in small community systems. Don't view Wright Pierce as a big pipe company. It's not true. We're hired because of our abilities to look at small systems. We're involved in virtually every innovative technology out there for our clients all over the country. And I think that guidance and knowledge and background was conveyed to the Wastewater Management Steering Committee to come up with a good plan. I mentioned that it took about 4 years to get the plan together. It took another 2 years to get it permitted. Wow, that's a lot of permitting. Well, it was extensive, detailed review of the CWMP, and the town came through with flying colors. There were 3 principal permitting activities: review under the Mass Environmental Policy Act through the Single Environmental Impact Report, review by the Cape Cod Commission as a development of regional impact. I mentioned the term DRI before. And lastly, an approval letter signed by Brian Dudley when the whole process was done to give DEP approval of the CWMP. Now, the regulatory process was cumbersome. We were busy for 2 solid years. Think about that. I have a copy of the state approval. I think it's 20 pages. I can barely pick up the 97-page Cape Cod Commission approval. There's a lot of material there. A lot of good people looked at the plan, and I'm pleased to say that the town did well. It was a well-received plan. I put this slide together. It's sort of an alphabet soup of who looked at this plan. And I know that questions come up over the intervening years since this project was put together. Questions about this aspect and that aspect, but recognize to that state and county review process, these agencies and many more looked at the plan. And these are people that are professionals, experts, and it's their job to poke holes at what you recommend to make sure that it's sound, that there aren't going to be environmental impacts of unexpected extent. And not only did those experts look at your plan and not have negative comments, they strongly endorsed it. They urged the town to move forward. The town got high marks for that plan based on a thorough review, more expertise in specific fields than exists here today.
So, thank you, Mike. I'm very impressed with the work that has been done by Wright, Pierce, and Weston and Sampson. In my experience of 50 years, their firms have really excellent reputations. The CWMP phasing plan, as Mike has indicated, it consists of 6 phases, which are shown on the slide, but kind of difficult to read, and I apologize for that. But you do have a map in front of you, printed out on 8.5 by 11, which really is an enlargement that shows kind of phase 1A, and also the other portions. So on this plan, there are the 6 phases that Mike has indicated, and phase 1 on the map on the slide is in blue. Phase 2 is kind of in a purple or violet. Phase 3 is kind of in red. Phase 4 is in gold, and phase 6 is in green. And phase 5 is on the south end of town, and it's not shown on this map. The phase 1A is a plan that Mr. Fuller came up with to try to move forward with the sewering of Orleans, which is very, very necessary. And it's kind of a hybrid, it's kind of a compromise solution. And it's shown on this map that you have in front of you and I have in front of me. And the heavy outline shows that a good portion of phase 1 and a very tiny portion of phase 3 and a portion of phase 4 are included in phase 1A. And basically it covers the downtown area, the densest area of Orleans. The design flow for this area, which will be accommodated, is 137,000 gallons per day. It includes various residential properties and business properties, and I'd just like to quickly go around the outline. On the right-hand side is Town Cove, and above that is Canal Road at the very top. As you come down Town Cove, the area would include the Orleans Inn, the Orleans Yacht Club, the Cove Motel, and would then continue down and across Academy Place, including the Academy Ocean Grill. I'm mentioning a number of restaurants as you can imagine. Then crosses back across Main Street, right around the Methodist Church, goes behind Snow's Library, and then follows down along the rear of the business properties on Route 6, on Route 28 and Route 6A, and then comes back to West Road, and up to the Cape Cod Rail Trail, which is right behind Old Colony Way. Included in the plan would be the Old Colony Apartments, the condominium development, and the condominium across the street from that. Included in that would be Abba Restaurant, the Staples Plaza, and then on up to Main Street, where the bicycle shop is, and Mahoney's Grill, and then continuing along the bike trail to include other residential and commercial properties. It does include the two restaurants, the Captain Elmer's, which is now being renovated and will be reopened under a new name, and Rosina's on Cove Road, which is being renovated and will be opened under a new name. I want to say Breakwater Grill, the Saltwater Grill, as some of you may know, has a problem with its sewerage. It has been closed for a number of years. And there are 24 other properties in downtown that are limited for redevelopment by the fact that their sewage can't be easily improved. Most of the lots are very small, and most of the lots contain a tremendous amount of either building area or parking area, so it's nigh unto impossible. Many of the restaurants pump weekly or bi-weekly because their septic system, their Title V system, is nothing more than a holding tank. The proposed Phase 1A plan will eliminate all of those problems. It will eliminate the septic systems within downtown and create a central sewer system that will include gravity pipes and pumps and force mains. People talk about pipe sizes. I brought with me today some wonderful examples. This is a 2-inch pipe. This would be used where sewage has to be pumped, whether it's through a particular street or from a particular property. It is a pressure pipe. There's a pump at one end, and there's a discharge, an open end into, say, a manhole where the flow would be by gravity. This is a 4-inch pipe. You have one of these in your house. I have one of these in my house. It runs from the house to the septic tank. It flows by gravity, which means it has a slope. It has to have a minimum slope of 2%, which is 2 feet in every 100 feet. This is an 8-inch pipe. This is the main gravity pipe that would be installed within the Phase 1A of the system. There will also be pump stations, and there will be force mains, either 2-inch or 4-inch, which would carry the sewage to the Tri-Town site, where the Tri-Town septic facility will be replaced with a brand new state-of-the-art wastewater treatment facility, which Mike has alluded to already. So the plan is nothing unusual. There are hundreds, there are thousands of these similar systems throughout the United States. As I always like to say, this is not rocket science. If it was, I wouldn't be here. It's a very straightforward design. It's easy for me to be able to describe this and describe what is being proposed because it's a simple system. As I've indicated to you, 137,000 gallons per day would be the flow for Phase 1A. That will be the capacity of the plant when it is constructed. There has been discussion about whether or not this could be expanded. There's been pros and cons on both sides. These pipes, particularly the 8-inch pipe, normally have additional capacity, so that if in the future, a future Board of Selectmen would want to expand the Phase 1A, let's say go out along Rock Harbor Road to take up some additional condominiums in that area, or expand to the east along Beach Road, it could be done because these pipes, for example, an 8-inch pipe, I told you that a 4-inch pipe has to have a minimum slope of 2%, 2 feet and 100 feet. An 8-inch pipe only needs a slope of 0.4%, which is 5 inches in 100 feet. The minimum, that's the minimum slope the pipe could be constructed at in accordance with the law. That pipe is good for a design capacity of 400,000 gallons per day if it were flowing 24 hours, just to give you a range of capacity. Again, this is not rocket science, these are all engineering facts, and it works. So you say, well, what is all this going to cost? And what we're going to be working on at town meeting is the cost of the design, and as Mike has said, we would be going into preliminary and then final design, which is plans and specifications and final estimate, to allow the plan to be bid. What does that mean? That means you go out to construction companies and ask them how much they need to have to construct in accordance with the plans and specs. The estimate done by Weston and Sampson, as Mike has alluded to, indicates a total cost for Phase 1A of $31.5 million. That includes $3.5 million for design. The $3.5 million is what will be voted upon in Article 11, assuming that comes up at town meeting, which I believe it will. What does that cost? What does that mean to the homeowner? If you have a $500,000 house, the cost will range from $146 per year for 30-year bond issue to $192 to $238. Why the difference? Well, if we're able to get the 0% financing through state revolving funds, it'll be $146 a year. And if we have to go and bond the work and have a 4% bond, it's $238 per year. What is the cost of the $3.5 million a year? It's about 10% of that. So if we, again, were able to obtain 0% financing, it would be $15 per household per year for a $500,000 house. It would be $20 a year if we have to float a 2% bond, and it would be $25 a year approximately if we would have to have a 4% bond. Those are the numbers that were included in the Weston and Sampson estimate based upon the reconfiguration of Phase 1A. Mike has discussed, and will discuss further, the adjustment to the approvals. It has been my experience in the state of Massachusetts that a minor amendment, and that's what I consider this to be, Phase 1A from Phase 1, is a pretty easy thing to obtain. We've done it before and on numerous projects, and that has been our experience. It's based upon the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, which has been approved previously. This is a modification of it, so I am confident that that will be accomplished in relatively short order. The plant itself will be a state-of-the-art plant, and it will include the septage treatment for Orleans. For Orleans only, as some of you may be aware, or hopefully you're all aware, the Board of Selectmen recently voted to decommission the existing Tri-Town facility in 2015. What does that mean? That means that that plant will be eliminated. It might be a year or two later, but that's the plan. In order to be fair, Mr. Fuller has recommended that we treat septage in this new plant for Orleans, because and there may be a lot of you here, like Hannelore and I, we're never going to have a sewer because it's not needed. We live on the mill pond. So we're going to continue to have our septic system. We're going to continue to have to pump it and take care of the solids in the septic system. And if this is approved, our septic will go, as it did last year, to the Tri-Town plant, which will be the new treatment plant, because the Tri-Town plant will be eliminated. Basically, that's the plan. It's not really too complicated. I know that a lot of people have expressed concern about questions and so on. I think that's why we're here today. And I have nothing to gain. There have been people who said, oh, well, he wants the next sewer job. He wants to build a shopping center in town. Believe me, I have absolutely nothing to gain. And it's a pleasure to be able to tell the truth. And that is the truth.
Okay, we have 2 left to go. We have crossed the 35-minute timeline, so I just give you a heads-up warning. Let's go for maybe about another 10 minutes. Can you two?
Yeah, I will. Some of the content I was going to cover was previously addressed,
okay.
So I'll be able to go a little bit quicker. I'm going to back up just a little bit and talk about the CWMP process, what wastewater management alternatives or conditions we're looking at, the range of alternatives that we looked at, and sort of the extent of deliberations. CWMPs are done generally in 4 phases. The first phase is called the needs assessment, where you spend time and effort figuring out exactly what the issues are so that you can solve the right problem. The next step is identification of alternatives, where you look at a range of technologies and approaches to solve the problem. Then there's an evaluation of alternatives phase, where you apply cost and subjective non-cost factors to an analysis to be able to say, okay, it costs this much and it does this for us. Which plan do we like the best? And then the 4th phase is development of the recommended plan. At each of those phases, the Water Management Steering Committee had public hearings, so this information was available and out for a long period of time. The major wastewater management categories of need, we call them, are, Mike briefly touched on them. There's sanitary. We also need to consider drinking water protection, whether it's the public drinking water supply or private drinking water wells. We need to look at surface water protection, whether those be ponds or coastal waters. We need to look at economic development to make sure the town has a suitable tax base into the future and can meet its local comprehensive plan. And finally, we look at something we call convenience and aesthetics, which might be mounted systems, tight tanks, things like that, where Title V works, but it doesn't produce a great result. We put all of those things together and come up with what are the wastewater management needs of the town. So when we moved into the alternatives phase, or identification of alternatives, we considered all the items that are on the slide here. We looked at how much of the town could be addressed with on-site denitrification systems, which are not Title V systems. They're the next step up. You do additional nitrogen treatment on your own property. We looked at alternative toilets. We looked at step systems. We looked at some non-traditional measures like permeable reactive barriers, as well as fertilizer controls. And then we also looked at more structural measures, small treatment plants, bigger treatment plants, and then things like effluent reuse. If we can look ahead into the future and realize water is a finite commodity, we need to be mindful of what we do with it. And there might be things that we can do better with water that's been treated to a drinking water standard than water our grass. So we shortlisted down to a set of town-wide plans. We went from 9 general plans to 3 specific town-wide plans. One was a decentralized approach that had 3 treatment plants and I believe 6 or 7 disposal sites throughout town, spread out among the different major watersheds in town. We looked at the centralized plan, which ultimately was the recommended plan. And we looked at another centralized plan, which was located in South Orleans, that had a strong effluent reuse component to it. Each of these plans had a cost estimate and an evaluation matrix. was deliberated by the Water Management Steering Committee for, we guesstimated, over 500 hours of public meetings. And that's, as a group, not their collective mind power. They were presented at public meetings. They were presented at a series of summer workshops in 2008, 7 workshops throughout various neighborhoods in town to really get a feel for what each portion of the town thought about the plans. And ultimately, Plan 2 is what was recommended. Plan 2 was the 6-phase plan that Mike discussed, and Phase 1A is consistent with that plan. We did look at a number of options related to the collection system. Gravity sewers, low pressure sewers. We looked at step systems, as I mentioned before, as well as vacuum sewers. They do have cost implications, but they're also maintenance and operational considerations, odor issues. For all these reasons, the CWMP recommended a conventional gravity sewer system, which is supplemented with grinder pump low pressure systems where it made sense from a cost and environmental perspective. And that's essentially what was validated in the Weston and Sampson work that was recently completed. So as far as growth, taking now a step back, how far into the future should the town plan? The smart aleck answer is as far as you can. It's a crystal ball effort, but we work closely with the town planner. Mr. Mazzurri did a great job, very thorough effort on this. And we looked at what is the theoretical build-out that the town could see 50, 60, 70, 80 years in the future. There's undeveloped land in town, there's zoning and bylaws that dictate how much theoretical build-out you could have. And that was 84% greater than today's flows. Significant. We then applied sort of a practical judgment, how much of that could really happen. Not every inch of land is going to be developed to the fullest extent allowed by zoning bylaw. There are issues like schools, water system, roads, traffic, things like that go into what we term a practical build-out. And that number was significantly less, 36% higher than current flows. And then we said, okay, we're still talking about 50, 60 years down the road. We're only planning for 20, 30 years down the road. And that was the 22% growth that has been incorporated into the CWMP, into the recommended plan. Will this plan produce uncontrolled growth? And the answer to that is no, for 2 reasons. One, if we want any chance of qualifying for a 0% SRF loan, the plan needs to be what's termed growth neutral. And growth neutral means that wastewater flows generated in a newly sewered area cannot be any greater than what Title V or current zoning would allow. So we need to carefully, when we have language that's been developed that would be incorporated into the town's future sewer use ordinances, that would put that constraint in place and keep the town eligible for 0% SRF financing. The other key item is, with Phase 1A, the downtown area, the town has bylaws which dictate how much of a particular parcel needs to have land set aside for parking, sidewalks, access, things like that. And from discussions with the town planner, we're confident that there won't be additional increase in flow, uncontrolled growth in the downtown based on sewering that portion of town. A good case in point of that is Chatham. Chatham downtown has had sewers for 40 years. I think most people will recognize that the Chatham downtown is still a quintessential Cape downtown. So the last thing I'm going to touch on is downtown construction. There's going to be a lot of concern about the disruption that utility construction will have in the downtown area. And Chatham, again, is a great case in point. If you went there last summer, you probably were frustrated. And you'll have a chance to talk to them next week if you choose to come and ask questions. I've spoken with Bob Duncanson, who is sort of the wastewater guru for Chatham, and he'll admit that they didn't really give it as much forethought as they would have liked in hindsight. And there are a number of things that you can do, incorporating elements into your bidding documents. So your contractor knows when they give you a price that they can only work at night, or they can only work 3 days a week, or they have to allow the restaurants to have their deliveries at 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. These are the kind of things that you can work out as if you have an open dialogue with the businesses, discussions with not just the restaurants, not just retail, not just the professional organizations. So they all have different needs, but you need to meet with them, hear them, and incorporate that into the bidding document so that ultimately through construction, it'll be disruptive, but it'll be managed. It'll be something people can live with. You get through it, and then you have some utilities that you want. And coordinate those efforts with the redevelopment efforts that are being considered, like the sidewalk modifications and changing how the power is downtown to utility, overhead utilities. So it can be a manageable process. You have to put effort and energy into planning that prior to construction.
Okay. Brian, bring it home.
Thank you. Since I've got about 30 seconds, I'll speak fast like a FedEx man.
That's why he's back from last time.
You have 3 minutes.
We, as DEP, had recognized that there are several issues, as previous speakers have touched upon, in terms of why you would want to look at wastewater management. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, and that is a collaborative effort with Mass DEP and the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth through the School of Marine Science and Technology to evaluate nitrogen sensitivity in embayments throughout southeastern Massachusetts. And using the basis of those reports and evaluations for the systems that are impacted by Orleans, which include Pleasant Bay, Namscayket Marsh, Little Namscayket Marsh, and Nauset estuarine system, we were able to come up with the level of impairment and thresholds and predictions of nitrogen reduction that would be necessary to restore these systems back to appropriate habitat, and looking at the different metrics that we would avail ourselves. Now, it turns out that Namscayket and Little Namscayket, through that evaluation, actually have assimilative capacity. That means that they can take in more nitrogen than they already are without having an impact on those systems. This approach has been validated and has been studied under numerous independent efforts. Most notably is the peer review effort that was funded by the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, where it assembled a panel of nationally recognized experts. Some of the members who have served on National Academy of Science peer review panels, and they determined that the methodology was scientifically valid and functionally adequate to proceed with comprehensive wastewater management planning. It was an appropriate basis to do so. The town of Orleans has also, on its own, funded independent reviews for the Pleasant Bay report that was completed by the Woods Hole Group, and for the Nauset system that was completed by ASA Incorporated. And both those studies found that the methodology and the conclusions were appropriate and an appropriate basis to move forward in planning. So we believe that there is significant evidence scientifically for the town to move forward in its wastewater planning and to come up with appropriate measures for nitrogen reduction. However, the phased approach through adaptive management does allow for remodeling of any conditions that may change in the intervening years that would warrant reconsideration. And that is really the beauty of the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, in that the model that is developed for each system is a predictive tool, so that you can look at how you may approach different scenarios in terms of looking at nitrogen reduction, or also as natural conditions change, how those may affect the ability to restore the systems to an appropriate level of water and habitat quality. This would all be permitted through our groundwater discharge permit program. I think it's important to realize that the Tri-Town plant that is currently operating has a groundwater discharge permit, and that it discharges at much higher levels of nitrogen than would be proposed through the plant that has been recommended in the approved CWMP. The new plant will need a new permit. That process does require an opportunity for public comment as part of the groundwater discharge permitting process. And it involves a hydrogeologic evaluation of the ability of the site to take the wastewater, and it also requires a significant engineering report that outlines what the treatment processes are going to be and how those treatment processes are going to meet projected limits. I think it's also important to note, I just did a very quick calculation, that based on roughly 45,000 gallons that is currently discharged from the Tri-Town plant at roughly 20 milligrams per liter of nitrogen versus 136,000 gallons that you've heard would come from the Phase 1A at a design of about 3 milligrams per liter, that 136,000 gallons actually decreases the amount of nitrogen that would be discharged compared to the existing plant.
Okay, so just to summarize very quickly, the Orleans Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan is a thorough evaluation of the viable options available to the town of Orleans. The CWMP lays out an adaptive 6-phase plan, as Mike has described, aimed at TMDL compliance and pond protection, both the nitrogen and the phosphorus. The CWMP recommends a hybrid plan with non-structural, decentralized, and centralized components. There has been discussion about putting in stormwater management improvements, conservation moorings, and a number of other things. That has been in the plan all along. It's nothing new. The Fuller Plan, Phase 1A, represents a savvy fine-tuning of the CWMP Phase 1 and the ancillary phases that are all incorporated into it to make it Phase 1A. Phase 1A is consistent with the significant permitting work completed to date. And based on my experience, I don't see a problem with an amended plan that way. And lastly, we hope that town meeting Article 11 will be supported by everyone here to move ahead with the project. And like Brian was saying, engineering too is a beautiful thing. We can adjust as we go along. We do adjust as we go along. And when adjustments have to be made to future phases, if they are elected, they can be made. This is not, nothing is fixed. The only thing that would be fixed is when Phase 1A is completed, that will be completed. Even there, additional flows could be accepted into the 8-inch pipe, that good old 8-inch pipe. And by the way, the one I mentioned, the slope I mentioned, that's the minimum flow. If you tip that up to 2%, you get a heck of a lot more flow every day through it. So that's the pipe story. And thank you all for coming, and we hope that you'll vote positively for town meeting Article 11. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. it's 10 after 5, and I think we, by consensus, we would go to maybe 5:45, 46. We'll see how we're doing. And if we want to take a little additional time, we'll do that. But that gives us a good 35 minutes by my watch for questions. So what I ask you to do is, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll recognize you. If there are multiple hands, I'll tell you how I'm going to go as best I can. And then please state your name. If you would stand up and ask your question, there are microphones that will be brought to you. No speeches. The fellow the other night had a wonderful term. Don't freight your questions. He had such class. I don't have that class, so I say, don't make a speech, just make a question. A good, quick question. If you go into a speech, I'm going to interrupt you. I'll tell you that much now. And ask you to get to your question, because that's what we want to do. Take about a minute per question. I'll time you on my stopwatch. No, I won't. Take what you need to address your question, and then we'll let the panelists decide among themselves who wants to take that question and respond. We'll give you a follow-up question if you feel you need it for further clarification, okay? And I'll recognize first questioners first, and if we finish all the first questioners, then we can go around and can ask second questions. And I don't know if we got to third questions or not. Maybe we'll just call it for dinner by that time. So let's have a good time, a civil time, asking questions to clear up the complex and to mitigate any confusion that might still be with you. So who wants to go first? I see a hand over here. Well, I saw this hand. I'm the moderator.
It's a quick question,
Your
but it
name,
probably
please.
won't be a quick answer. My name's Rebecca, and I'm just wanting to know, for the sake probably not only of myself but others, but what are the leading criticisms and challenges to the plan that has been outlined, Phase 1A, and sort of what are the origins of those concerns, and this would be an opportunity to address them.
Okay, we're now going to go to 8 o'clock. Good question. Who wants to take it? Shall we, let's hold that question, because it's a good question. Let's keep it in the back of our minds. It may come up by other questions. Is that fair? We do that? And we'll see how it comes up by other questions. And then if not, we'll come back to it. But I see a hand back there and then a hand over there. Yes.
Hi, Joshua Larson. I'm on the Orleans Finance Committee. What, in your view, from an engineering and construction point of view, is the biggest risk in terms of both cost and timing of completing Phase 1?
Timing.
What element of this? Is it topography, geology?
I believe that, number one, based on past history, there's no better time than now for construction. We've seen in the last 5 years construction costs go down. Why? Because contractors are hungry. Why? Because the economy has been in the dump. So we have a great opportunity right now. The sooner we can get this done and get it bid, the better off we will be. Construction-wise, we talked about Chatham before. I drove many times along Route 28 in Chatham while they were putting in the sewers, while they were repaving. And they had tremendous numbers of signs for the businesses. Those businesses, they had a hard time while the construction was going on. Yet they maintained one lane of traffic in each direction, sometimes interrupted by flagmen, by police officers. They had a tremendous detour system. They kept traffic flowing. They kept the construction going. Even when they repaved, and Route 28 throughout the construction area is really nice now because it's all been repaved, they had to put in the same detours and so on. In Orleans, we have a little different situation, actually a better situation, because our streets are basically wider than they are than Route 28 is in Chatham. It's very, very narrow, and We have, for example, on Main Street, there's one lane of traffic in each direction, plus a parking lane on each side. So we have room to put in the sewer, to dig a trench, put in the sewer, and load the trucks up and take the materials away, and yet maintain one lane of traffic, in my opinion. We also have, for example, between Route 6A and Route 28, Cove Road. So that can be used as an alternate access up and down between those two roads. So there's a lot of flexibility because of the network, the road network system within downtown. As you get out into the outer areas, Old Colony Way is very, very wide. I don't think there's a street that I know of in Chatham that's that wide. I don't see a major problem, and yet there will be disruptions of traffic because of the construction. There's no question about it. Topography, we don't have a lot of topography, so I don't see that as a problem, except that we will be needing a number of pumping stations, as you do all over Cape Cod. That is included in the plan. The other items, soils. You either have sand or you have clay here, both of which can be handled. There are trench boxes so that when you put in that pipe or that pipe, you put in a trench box, which is a steel enclosure, you dig, and you put that trench box down, and then you can install your pipe so that you don't have to do a lot of sheathing, and you don't have sides collapsing in on you. So that is, because we don't have rock here to any great extent, you might have some boulders, potatoes as I call them, there should not be a problem with respect to rock excavation, which you have in many other areas of the country. There will be some disruption, some inconvenience, which is true of any construction, but I don't see it as a major problem. I think comparing Chatham to Orleans, we're in a much better situation, I believe, in Orleans than Chatham is because of the width of the streets and so on. And also the street network, which allows for easy detouring. Does that answer your question?
Let me answer, John, just in a little bit different direction. I talked about preliminary design and final design. A lot of good things come from a good, thorough preliminary design. And one of them that we would recommend is a risk assessment. Before you embark upon all the details in the plans and specifications that are going to go to bidding, think about what might go wrong and develop a plan to deal with it. So among the many benefits of a preliminary design effort is think about the things you don't want to happen, not just that which you do want to happen, and plan accordingly.
Okay, I saw the hand over there against the wall, and then the gentleman here in the middle.
Thank you, John Sargent. I came a little late, so if this was addressed, just tell me and I'll get the answer later. One of the things that the opponents have been using, as I would call a scare tactic, is the overflow in Hull, where there were 10 million gallons went into the bay and all this and that. Could you comment on why that could not happen here?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think there was, I was not at the last meeting, we were away somewhere.
There was a question. Yes.
There was a question on that. There was an article in the Cape Codder a number of months ago about a sewage overflow which occurred in Hull, Massachusetts. It occurred on February 28th this year. The existing plant, they have a conventional sewage treatment plant there. They have a headworks which takes the sewage in from the town, raw sewage. It is processed through the plant. The main plant itself, the main building itself, has a basement 30 feet deep. That has a series of influent pumps, those are pumps to take care of the sewage coming into the plant, and effluent pumps. After the sewage is treated, the effluent pumps pump the sewage out of the basement of the plant after going through the process, and pump the waste into a piped outfall which goes into Massachusetts Bay. What happened? What happened was, and I investigated this, and as you can imagine, as I understand it, this is a subject for perhaps an insurance claim. So it's a sensitive matter. However, Hull is an old town, and there are areas in the upper reaches, the hills of Hull, which have sewers that date back to the 19th century, the 1800s. Those sewers originally were combined sewers. That is, they took storm drainage and they took sanitary sewage from the houses. They, in the process of building this plant and upgrading their system, they attempted to separate, to make separate sewers for the storm drainage or storm water and for the sewage. They don't believe that they were totally successful in every area. They also have a problem in Hull because of high groundwater. And in Hull, they have a lot of sump pumps in the basements of the houses. This is not an unusual problem. It's something that has to be dealt with. Very often, sump pumps in the individual homeowners, rather than take the discharge from their sump pump to the street, to a catch basin, they more conveniently tie it into their house sewer, their 4-inch sewer, and that ends up in the plant. It is believed by those who I spoke with that that problem exists today, and during this very, very heavy storm, they were overloaded. Now, that plant has a normal design flow, has a design capacity, a normal daily flow of about 1.3 million gallons per day. During this storm, and during previous storms, they have had flows of as much as 13 million gallons per day, and the plant has handled it. The plant is flexible in its design and it's capable of doing it. This plant was overwhelmed for several reasons. Number one of the effluent pumps was out of service before the start of this storm. Completely out of service. During the storm, a second effluent pump went out of service. Basically, there was no place to pump the stuff. You know what it is. I know what it is. So what they did was they put in a temporary pumping system, as is often done when you have an emergency, and they put hoses out to Massachusetts Bay, and the effluent that they were pumping out, although it was raw sewage, was extremely dilute because of all the storm water that was mixed in. Those are the facts. I stand by the facts. I have checked it out. Because of the sensitivity of the matter, I am not willing to disclose at this point who I spoke with. However, if I have the approval to do that in the future, you have my word that I will tell everybody in the public who I spoke to. End of story. I hope that ends.
Okay.
Why can't it happen here?
Well,
Let someone else answer. Could we hear from someone
Well,
else?
just one follow-up on that, and then we'll move to the gentleman over here, yes.
I guess I can address your follow-up.
Yeah.
For a couple reasons, John mentioned that combined sewer, older sewer system, and this would be a brand new system that wouldn't have all that extra flow that comes in during rain events. Treatment plants are mechanical in nature, so it could happen. I mean, that kind of thing can happen. There, water mains break, gas mains leak. It's a utility. We lose power from time to time. The key thing is to have a management plan in place, to have staff that's available to react to situations and to react to it appropriately. In the specific case of Orleans, you don't have a pipe that goes directly to Cape Cod Bay, and you won't. So anything that would happen at the plant would be contained on the plant site. So you wouldn't have something that went directly out to the bay, or even to the marsh.
Okay.
And another significant difference that's important is that John mentioned that the Hull plant has pumps in and pumps out. The reason for that is it's very low line. And during that particular storm, waves were coming over the seawall into the plant site and flooded those deep pump wells. The nice thing about one of the nice things about the Tri-Town site is it's up, 30 or 40 feet above sea level. So the site itself is not going to be conducive to the fundamental issue of overwhelming of the seawall at high tide.
I would add one other thing. The the Tri-Town site where the treatment plant would be is above the 100-year floodplain. In Hull, the address is Nanskaket Road. It's on a causeway. It's separated. The causeway is separated on both sides by Massachusetts Bay. The plant was slated to be open in 1979. There was a hurricane in 1979 which flooded the plant completely before it even opened. They had to modify the design of the plant. I'm amazed that they didn't really take this into account. They had to flood-proof the plant to hopefully prevent further flooding in the future, which wasn't successful as it turns out.
Okay, let's move on. A gentleman over here, and I believe you're 60-plus years in
I'm
Orleans.
Louis Reed, I live on Chase Lane.
Yep.
I'd like to know what is so bad about nitrogen. Nitrogen consists of 80% of our air we breathe. Nitrogen, the nitrogen cycle, is necessary for plant life.
Okay, we heard the question.
I got about 20.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you one. What is so bad about nitrogen?
Yeah.
The issue really is what form of nitrogen are we talking about?
You tell me.
Right, and that's what I intend to do. When you're talking about atmospheric nitrogen, basically that's what we're looking to do, is to convert the other forms of nitrogen into atmospheric nitrogen so that it is discharged to the atmosphere, where it does make up 80% of the air that we breathe, but it is an inert form of nitrogen that does not have an impact on public health, or doesn't have an impact on the ecology of these systems that we're trying to protect. Nitrogen, the form of nitrogen that is of issue here is nitrate. And nitrate nitrogen is the kind of nitrogen that you find in fertilizers. And that results in, as you get an imbalance in an open water body, a coastal water body, that imbalance of nitrogen fertilizes and allows for rampant growth of algae, which in turn can result in lower dissolved oxygen, which results in fish kills, which can result in shading of the system itself so that we lose valuable resources like eelgrass, which is a habitat for finfish, for shellfish, is necessary for the life cycle of many of the species that we rely on either for our economy or for recreation. So it really comes down to the form of nitrogen that we're talking about, and the nitrate that is discharged as a result of incompletely treated wastewater is what we're concerned about and what we're trying to prevent.
Okay, one follow-up question.
One answer. I wonder if he knows that the DEP turned around and sponsored a survey or a study of the nitrate in Pleasant Bay, and they supported or gave a grant to Brown University. And Brown University studied the periwinkle, and they found out the periwinkle was a source of nitrogen. Now, if the EPA or whatever, DEP, they continue to hide the facts, and they do so in such a way as they promote a system. They know that Title V don't work because they put ammonia in the drinking water, chloroform, chlorine in the drinking water. And the chlorine kills the effects of the septic system.
Okay, we're
now,
getting
they know
into a
it, but they
speech.
don't attack that problem.
Okay, I'm going to
Shut me up and not going home.
Anyone want to address that briefly?
I'm not aware of that particular study, but if you can provide it to me, I would be more than happy to look
I
at
won't
it.
provide it. You paid for it at Brown University.
As I said, I'm not aware of that particular
Well,
study.
you should have been, because you,
Well, I'm not sure
you're the
that-
one that's saying...
Let's not argue.
nitrogen.
Let's not argue.
Let's
Well,
not
let's
argue.
see if we
I
can
go to
find-
hell hole.
Enjoy dinner. Enjoy dinner. Yes. Over here is a question.
Yeah, someone asked, so this is a time frame question. If everything goes optimally, things pass and permits don't get screwed up, what would be the most optimal time frame for this getting started and completed? If things go not so optimally, what's the plan B, the longest time frame you can imagine? No, not even you can imagine. What's likely to happen if things don't go optimally?
I'm going to kind of talk through this, speak as I think, dangerous. The appropriations at hand, next Monday night, I believe would make monies available July 1. Okay, I think that's the case. So, but starting July 1, then there's money available to do some preliminary and some final design under Article 11. The design process, I would advocate, based on the earlier gentleman's comment, take plenty of time in the preliminary design phase to get it right. So let's think that it might be a 2-year program to get the design complete. I think that's pessimistic, but make sure you do it right. A couple of years of construction, and then you should have facilities in place. I think that's a reasonable, middle of the road, 4 or 5 year time frame to be in place.
Okay.
If DEP should turn around and say, consent order, you must have it done tomorrow, then there's ways to do it faster, but we won't let Brian leave the room if that's the case.
You won't get your 0%.
A hand in the back, and then a hand over here on my right.
Dan Meany, I'm studying wastewater management. A couple questions, easy questions, I'm assuming. It makes me a little nervous. You guys are including Stop and Shop area. Do they have their own? Okay, sorry. Stop and Shop. Do they have their own septic treatment plant there at Stop and Shop? And are you including Stop and Shop in the Plan A1?
Yes and yes.
Okay. Are you also including this street sewers in with the wastewater stream that comes from the businesses?
The sewers will take the wastewater from the businesses. The septic tanks and septic fields, such as they are in the businesses, will be eliminated.
I'm talking about the road runoff.
No, absolutely not. No stormwater runoff will be included in the system. It's prohibited by law, and we wouldn't want to do it anyway.
Okay.
One more
question. Yes.
One more.
Okay. The second question is, do you have any wiggle room in the size of the system? Granted, now our density of the town is in a particular spot, but in like 20 years, who knows what we might go in to make the density more dense, so there may be more housing. Is there a little bit of wiggle room in the design?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Actually, the plan, the 137,000 gallons per day, takes into account the ability to put housing on the second floor of the businesses in downtown, because there is such a need for housing for employees, and it doesn't exist here now. That's part of the plan. That doesn't require additional parking. It doesn't require a whole lot of things that would be needed otherwise, and it will allow for the construction of such housing if the landlords so desire. I understand that, I've heard, this is hearsay, that Mid-Cape is very interested in doing that on their facility there. So good engineering would also tell me that I'm going to put a 10% factor into it to be sure that unforeseen events are taken care of. We always provide a very conservative design.
Okay, I saw a hand over, yes, over there to my right.
Jim Hungerford, Renewable Energy Committee. Can any of the panelists tell us whether the one of the design goals of the new sewage treatment plant will include renewable energy sources or a source? And the reason I'm asking that now is we're trying to promote renewable energy as an afterthought to some of the existing sites here in Orleans, and the number of hurdles that keep popping up with new permits and Article 97 issues and issues that I probably haven't even run into yet. We would like to make sure that this is being considered right up front.
Okay, got the question? Yep.
I can answer that. Let me answer it this way. In the CWMP, we did include a number of measures for renewable energy. And admittedly, they weren't extensive measures. It wasn't, a dedicated windmill for the treatment plant site or things like that. But we did include things such as orientation of the building to make sure that you minimize the amount of energy required to heat the building. We included an allowance for solar photovoltaic. We included an allocation for reuse or capturing heat from the effluent before it's discharged to the rapid infiltration basin. So again, it's something that would offset the use of non-renewable fuels. I can't say for certain whether those elements were incorporated into the Phase 1A project because that level of detail isn't available or wasn't available to us. It's certainly common to try and include things like that into a treatment plant project these days.
Okay, yes, over here, Jim?
Jim Bash, is there a cap or a limitation on SRF funds available for wastewater planning on Cape Cod? And if it is voted down at this town meeting, is there a risk that Orleans would never get to the point where we would be qualified and be beaten out by other communities which would be ahead of us to get limited SRF money? Thank you.
With regard to SRF, which is the state revolving fund, which provides the zero or low interest loans for facility construction, it's a competitive process. First of all, for communities, and as they submit their projects, they are rated on a point scale, and those that have the highest points are the ones that tend to get funded. Although I think recently most of the projects that have been submitted have been funded. There is not a limit or a cap on projects for funding on the Cape. Where there is a cap, though, is the amount of available funds to be loaned that would be eligible for the 0%. I think it is something like 35% of what would be available is set aside for the 0%. To be eligible for the 0% funding, it requires 5 elements. That it has to address a nutrient-related issue. You have to have an approved CWMP. There has to be an element addressing gross neutrality. It has to be consistent with a regional plan, and there is one more. It's up on the screen. It's up on the slide. It's up there. Okay. So there's the 5th one. Yes, the community is not under any sort of enforcement order. However, the eligibility for 0% or the allowance for the 0% does expire in 2019. And after that, then if you were to go with SRF, it would be at 2% rate, or if it were self-funded, it would be at whatever the current bond market would bear.
I see a question.
May I steal a follow-up question from Jim, which is just, Brian, you mentioned the 35%. That is, I believe, on the total amount of money that's available. It's not that a community is limited to 35% of their project.
Yes, I'm sorry if that was confusing. Yes, that 35% cap is for the total amount that is available for lending.
Okay, the question back there.
Ken McCusick, is this plant going to be able to handle chemicals other than nitrates, such as pharmaceuticals and other possible pollutants?
It will be designed for conventional parameters in addition to nitrogen. It won't be specifically designed at this point for contaminants of emerging concern or phosphorus removal, primarily because there wouldn't be an effluent limitation for those constituents in the current permit. Generally, the current thinking is that the best way to deal with contaminants of emerging concern, which are things like caffeine and Advil and pharmaceuticals that are finding their way into our waters, is to have a centralized location where you can apply additional treatment steps to remove those compounds. So the CWMP doesn't include the actual equipment to do it at this time, but does recognize that in the future it will be something, it's in the research phases now, so we expect it to be coming, and the CWMP positions the town to be able to respond to that when that information is routine, I guess.
I agree with that there isn't a specific process, Ken, that would go after those compounds. The problem is, which compound do you want to go after? There are thousands of them. And the beauty of the system that's been recommended is that it incorporates several of the chemical and biological and physical processes that will peck away at those compounds and provide some removal. There's a treatment in the presence of oxygen, treatment in the absence of oxygen, there's passage to the soil, to the groundwater infiltration basins, all of which kind of in a gross way address those. The bottom line is that there isn't one process that goes after all of the contaminants. There will be some significant removal that occurs, but it will be sort of incidental. But by having wastewater in one location, in the future when our technology is available, they can be readily applied.
And there's enough land to do that.
Okay, there's a question over here. Oh, we're going to take maybe 3 or 4 more questions. I see the hands here, then there, and then here, and then over there. Okay, help me remember that, please.
Jane Hussey. Just to go back to Mr. Bass' question, the 35% in the in the state revolving fund, what kind of a figure does that represent?
It varies from year to year in terms of how much is available for lending. I can't offhand tell you what the overall numbers have been over the past several years, but I mean, usually when we're looking at a pot of money to lend out, it's in I'd say the $100 to $300 million range, roughly, something like that.
Okay.
So that's the total pot, and it would be 35% of that.
Okay. Yes, I saw a hand there, then over to Jane here, and then over there.
Judy Scanlon. There's been a lot of discussion about pipes here and also around on the internet. I think there is a vision by some that there'll be thousands of gallons worth of treated effluent flowing across Nantucket Marsh and Creek. I've heard today discussion of filtration beds. I think what would be very helpful is if you have a slide that shows the plant and could explain what happens at the end of the pipe when it leaves the plant in a way that non-engineers can understand, like myself. Thank you.
Well, Ed is looking for the slide that we might have. Let's go back to Hull. Hull provides wastewater treatment under most circumstances and discharges the effluent in a pipe that goes into the ocean. On Cape Cod and in most coastal communities in Massachusetts now, such ocean discharges are prohibited. Communities use land-based systems, and what's recommended for Orleans is rapid infiltration, open sand beds, where the effluent after treatment is then spread across the bottom of the sand bed and percolates into the ground. That effluent goes down through what we call an unsaturated zone, through soil that it does not have groundwater in it, eventually reaches the groundwater, merges with the groundwater, and then flows towards some downhill, down gradient point. What is the down gradient receptor from the Tri-Town site? And I'm not going to try to repeat all that was talked about last week, but that effluent impacted groundwater, meeting all standards when it leaves the plant, let alone at any point downstream, flows downward and off to the north from the Tri-Town site towards Cape Cod Bay. Some of it may eventually reach the stream bottoms in Nantucket Marsh itself. Some of it may pass completely under the marsh and come out into Cape Cod Bay. So I'm going to draw the contrast with the old style plant like Hull. When the drop of effluent leaves the Hull plant, it's within minutes, it's in the ocean. A drop of effluent leaving the proposed plant at the Tri-Town site will first see some sunlight as it spread across the bottom of the sand infiltration bed. It will see sand filtration. It will pass through soil that has oxygen in it, unsaturated soil. It will mix with the groundwater. There will be physical and biochemical processes acting on it. It will proceed downward, perhaps a small amount coming into stream beds within the stream channels within the marsh, and the rest continuing on to Cape Cod Bay. So if you shorten the time frame at Tri-Town, the eventual impact is similar to Hull. But the beauty of the site is you can't shorten the impact. The time is in years or decades or even longer.
Before we go any further, my wife will kill me for this, but Judy, I will take you and anyone else in this room and anyone else in this town to the Tri-Town septic facility and show you what a rapid infiltration basin is. There are a number of them over there. I'll explain to you how they work, and you can see it firsthand. My telephone number at home is 508-240-5892.
There'll be a sign-up list on the table for your little field trip. But
I'm serious.
I saw Jane, and then I saw the lady over there, and the gentleman here. So, and I think those will be the three remaining questions, unless they see someone really jumping in their seat.
Mr. Moderator, let's not forget to go back to Rebecca's question at the end.
The first one,
yes.
My question is, I know that one of the reasons for choosing downtown as the place where we're going to sewer first is because it's efficient, because it has a high amount of nitrogen content. And then I know that we're required to eliminate approximately, maybe slightly more than 50% of the total nitrogen coming out of our sewers. So my question is, what percentage roughly will be accomplished by just doing the downtown? Of the total that we must remove, how much of it is coming out of it, will be coming out of downtown?
Clear question? And who's going to take it?
I'll take that one. There are target nitrogen removals by watershed, Pleasant Bay, Rock Harbor / Cedar Pond, and also the Nauset system. If you look at the total amount of nitrogen that the scientists tell us should be removed from the Nauset system, it's my understanding that between 40 and 50% of that amount would be removed by the program recommended as phase 1A.
Okay.
This gentleman.
The gentleman here in the front. Yep. So I'm there.
Madam Chairman, there's been some passionate debate in town about small pipes versus big pipes, and a lot of arguments against the CWMP because of the proposed or assumed benefit of the small pipe approach, directional drilling, all this kind of thing. I'm not suggesting we get into a long discussion, but could you refute that challenge briefly?
You never ask.
You're welcome.
Oops, there it is. So these are pictures of basically small pipe systems. On the upper left is a grinder pump system with a low pressure, what's called the low pressure sewer, and on the lower right is a step system. In either case, you have a pump station at your property. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm still on video. Something better. So you have a pump station on your property that's either a pump station itself or it's immersed in your septic tank. In the step system, you have also the septic solids to deal with. The small pipe approach with a grinder pump station, you still have the solids. It's basically a ground up mixture that's in the small pipe. In the step system, you've sort of clarified it by leaving the solids in your septic tank and then pumping the clearer liquid. In both cases, they tend to be very strong and odorous because they're what's called anaerobic, which is absent of oxygen, and when they reach the wherever they're discharged to atmosphere, they have a tremendous odor that you have to deal with. There's certainly some advantages to small pipe from a construction perspective. You look at those, they're not dramatically different in size, but you can, if you imagine directional drilling, which is tunneling, essentially, small diameter tunneling, it's a lot easier to get a small pipe from point A to point B than a bigger pipe. There's certainly cost advantages to directional drilling where you are less sensitive to needing a careful slope. If you can kind of snake around obstructions, whether they be boulders or other utilities, there are some advantages to that. That doesn't mean that we can't use directional drilling in some elements of the CWMP. But I think from the O&M perspective, there's going to be a lot more cost. I think that was demonstrated in the Weston and Sampson report that there is more cost associated with the maintenance of the step systems because you have a pump station at basically 3,000 properties, or a smaller number if it's just the phase 1 project. But if you apply it on a broad scale, 3,000 properties have pump stations on their land. They have to store sewage if there's a loss of power. So there are issues and implications that go with having these types of systems on property.
I'd like to add that one of the first orders of business here is something that has been very controversial and been discussed at many selectmen's meetings, and that is how do we determine what pipes are in the ground, in the shoulders, in the pavement? The very first step in the design phase would be to do the surveys that are required. George Maservi indicated that last night that the cost of these surveys are $30,000 a mile, and it was decided not to go ahead with the surveys until I believe that the design has been approved. That is, the funding for the design has been approved, and a design company is given the job. Now, there's a good chance that in the looking at your map again, that the downstream end of the Phase 1A system in the vicinity of Abba, as it would come up Old Colony and then cross under West Road and go to the treatment plant to the east or to the west at that point, could be directional drilled. It would be my guess or my thought that there probably are not too many utilities in that area because there's not a lot of developed completion areas completed in that area. So we have a lot of ability to consider directional drilling. Once we know the information, then the decision will be made.
Okay, our last question over here. Yes.
Elizabeth DeLima. Follow on to an earlier question on the timeline. I'm really worried about 2019 looming, and it would be wonderful if we could get the 0% financing bidding done. How in the best of all possible worlds do we get there? Do we get ready in time to apply for the 2019 0% financing?
I'll take that question.
Okay.
You may be surprised to hear me advocate a strong preliminary design. I've only done it 4 times tonight, but here's another example where what you want to do is, when you're ready to move ahead, look at the hurdles you have ahead of you. Some of them are survey related to determine the best place to have directional drilling in small pipes. Some of them are, I've mentioned a bunch of them. Dealing with the permits that are required for having a financial plan in place. And the financial plan has got multiple components. It should be part of your preliminary design. Dave Withrow will be a big part of that. But it's obtaining grants. We're aware of, many of our clients have recently been able to get some grants. Not loans, but grants. Let's supplement those with other loans that are available, with SRF loans. But you need to get started. You need to have commission the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners to do their job, have the money available, bring on the right technical staff to do it, and look at all the issues you need to address. And we talked about a lot of them tonight. In that preliminary design stage, get them all in order. Come up with a plan that deals with alternative energy, that deals with all the issues we talked about. And then move ahead, I'm going to say, not necessarily quickly, but smartly. Come up with a plan that addresses all you need to do. Don't hurry unnecessarily, but there may be a need to hurry with respect to the funding. So that's when it gets done. And let's get started.
Based on my experience, I agree wholeheartedly with Mike.
I would only add that SRF cannot release funds for borrowing until there is a town meeting authorization to borrow.
All right. Our last question, the omega question, we're going to go back to the alpha question over here.
And a lot of that has already been addressed, like the small pipe. And, you know, I just was asking, sort of from a standpoint of naivete, if you could play devil's advocate to, you know, look at what some of those criticisms have been and how you've maybe addressed them or an alternative thought.
Let me just jump in, and you must know that when we prepared our slide presentation and decided what each of us was going to address, we really tried to do it in anticipation of concerns that have been raised. And we made the decision not to talk too much about Skakit Marsh and the purported impacts. I understand, without President, I understand a very good presentation last week on that subject. If you had a marsh in town and you knew nothing about it, and there was no existing discharge like there is at Tri-Town to monitor and see where it's going, you need to spend a lot of time and money to make sure that the proposal that's on the table is appropriate. But you have one of the most studied marshes around. You have some of the best scientists around. You have the ability to look at what's happened with the discharge so far. And you've had a very thorough multidisciplinary review through both the MEPA process and the county process. And the people that ought to be concerned if there was going to be a problem have said, go for it. I hope you can put that issue to bed. We talked about the small pipe, big pipe. I tried to address the fact that this is not a big pipe solution. This is a savvy combination of small systems, on-site systems, a small system at Baker's Pond, Headwaters, Aries Pond, etc., controlled central facility of small size, a groundwater discharge that takes advantage of processes at the treatment plant and processes to the soil. This is a hybrid plan, a plan developed. I'd like to take full credit for it, but the credit belongs to a group of very dedicated town officials and citizens that made it the Orleans plan. So it is rankling to me to hear that this pigeonholed into a category that just does not apply. So there's something you should take away.
I'd like to also say that, as John Fuller has said, this plan has something for everybody, and let's not forget that what would be voted upon on Article 11 next week is the preliminary design for a so-called hotspot at Meeting House Pond. So that will entail considering all of the properties that are involved that are tributary to Meeting House Pond, I'm sure. It will entail the surveying needed in order to put pipes in, however they're put in. It will entail studying the potential location for the treatment plant, and a treatment plant is proposed. And it will obviously have to study the disposal fields. There's a property called Hubler down by the beach, which the town bought to replace the beach parking lot if it's ever needed in the future. That is in the plan as the disposal site where the tile fields that you have in your backyard and I have in my backyard would be put to take the effluent from Meeting House Pond and put it into the ground. So all of that will be studied in the preliminary engineering. That has been a big controversy. It's been discussed at many selectmen's meetings, and that is now provided for.
Okay, we're going to try to bring this now to a close. You've been so patient, but I'm reading some body language, and some people look like they're getting ready to leave to go home for dinner. I just was asked if we do a quick bullet type summary, so if you'll indulge me that, I'm going to try to do that. Who watches Morning Joe in the morning? Yeah, Morning Joe and Mika. But they always end their show with a question. What did you learn today? So that's what we're going to do right now, very quickly. What did we learn? And this is very subjective on my part, but I've been asked to do it. We learned that only half the town is being considered for sewering. It's not the whole town, like some people say. It's half the town. The low-lying fruit, as it's so called, about fertilizer and road water and so forth, is addressed. It's a hybrid plan. It's not a big pipe or a small pipe. It's hybrid. There's no direct discharge any place. And the word any place I picked up strongly. No discharge directly any place. It's consistent with the Cape Cod Commission planning. It's an adaptive plan. It's done in phases. It allows for observation, monitoring, correctives when necessary. That's the best of 6 phases. Something new that I heard tonight, phase 5 or 6 might not even be necessary. Wow, if that should be the case, there's the savings. It's been reviewed and permitted 4 years, given flying colors. It was a cumbersome process, but well reviewed by professional experts. The properties downtown are limited to improvement and redevelopment, and Plan 1A, if voted successfully at town meeting, eliminates those problems so downtown can move forward with some improvement and development, something I think we'd all like to see. The system is designed for capacity to expand so that if in the future boards of selectmen decide to do so, they have the freedom to do so, but the plant has the capacity to handle that. That sounds like good forward thinking, at least to me. The cost of the design is just kind of mind-boggling at how cheap it is, I think. That's an editorial comment. Total phase 1A is only $3.5 million, give or take $1 million, and you got some big dollars, as who was that guy in Congress used to say that years ago. The total plan, if everything held, would be in the range of about $30 million. But then when you break it down, a $500,000 home and upwards is at a 0 interest loan, $146 a year. If the worst case scenario, 4% loan, it's $238 spread out of 30 years. The study, the $3.5 million, not all of that, by the way, is for 1A. As John mentioned, a part of that, $1 million and something, is for this pre-design study at Meeting House Pond. This one blew me away, and make sure I'm correct on this. A 0% loan is $15 a year. Did I hear that correctly?
For the design.
For the design? Yeah. But I heard much higher numbers than that, frightening numbers. I was ready to move to another town. And I don't want to do that. 4%, it's $25 a year to get this design work done. If I listened to those alone and discounted all what I heard tonight, engineering, and all what I heard scientifically at the first forum, I'd say, who would not want to vote for this bargain to remediate our waters and protect them? This one really, I thought, was interesting. The town looked at 3 plans, 500 hours of public meetings, and summer workshops in 2008 held throughout the town, and then the town chose Plan 2, the 6-phase plan, which 1A is part of, because they considered cost potential and environment impact. But the town made that decision. After those workshops, the town made it. I heard again, as I heard in the science forum, Little Namskakett and Namskakett Marsh are okay. They're okay now, and they will continue to be okay. They will be monitored. They are the most studied marsh in the nation, and they are studied by national experts, and they will be protected. It's a phased approach. It allows for changes in light of the monitorings and the discoveries from the monitorings and any natural impact that could change things. And we all know what Mother Nature is doing lately. So with that, I'm going to bring it to a close and thank the panel.
I'd particularly like to thank Brian and Mike and Ed, who came here because of concern for Orleans. I pay taxes here, I don't count, but I'd like to give them
Stay put. The benediction's coming. I want to thank Brian because he's been here both. And the scientists that showed up last week did that on their own dime. We did not pay them. They came again because of their love and their concern for what we're trying to do in Orleans. I want to tell you as you leave, please pick up these flyers. And again, thank you. Enjoy this beautiful evening in beautiful Orleans where the sunsets are breathtakingly beautiful, the water's wonderful and refreshing, and we want to improve and keep it that way. And Fran, your last word is, and then we'll let you go.
My last word is, don't forget next Tuesday.